If you're looking to buy or sell a home in New Jersey, contact our Coldwell Banker office in Wayne at 973-694-8000 or call Tim direct at 973-865-0249. You can also visit his website at www.homesinwaynenj.com. Tim's promise to you and your family is to provide you with exceptional real estate service while always working to exceed your expectations. And remember, at Coldwell Banker, we never stop moving.
Welcome to the New Jersey Real Estate Show. Now, here are your hosts, Tim Waller and Matt Josephs.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Jersey Real Estate Show. I'm Tim Waller, your host, and sitting to my immediate left is my co-host, the one and only Matt Josephs.
How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing wonderful. He's also known as the voice of reason.
Yes, that you're going to rue the day that you ever said that.
That's correct. We have a great show in store for our listeners today. We'll be discussing the difference between a short sale, foreclosure, bank-owned real estate, and how to purchase one of them. Our expert guest on this topic has been managing and disposing bank-owned real estate assets for the past 17 years. Don Fanelli is an agent with Coldwell Banker in our Wayne office and currently handles the disposition of REOs in 11 out of the 21 counties in New Jersey. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much.
Hey, Don, let's start by saying, what's the difference between a short sale, foreclosure, and a bank-owned property?
There's really two distinct differences between a short sale and a bank-owned property. A short sale means that it's still subject to a third-party approval. So you have the buyer, the seller, and the lien holder. The buyer and seller can agree to whatever price they want, but it's still subject to lien holder approval. They may or may not want to do a short sale. If they pass on it, then eventually it does go into a regular sheriff sale, bank-owned REO.
Right. Okay, in New Jersey, I believe that it's a judicial state where the bank actually has to go to court to seek a judgment to repossess that property?
Yes, that's correct. We're one of 21 states that must use the court system for a bank to do a foreclosure.
And about how long does that process take? I know back in 2007, 2008, during that credit crisis, the foreclosures were overwhelming, and there was a point in time they were backlogged. How long, you think?
Well, prior to 2006, we're looking at 2005, 2004, 2003, a foreclosure from start to finish as quick as 11 months, and average was 13, maybe 14 months.
Wow.
Today, you're looking at 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Well, how difficult is it for someone to purchase a home that's owned by a bank? And is the buying process any different than, say, a conventional purchase is?
As far as purchasing a bank-owned property, there really isn't much of a difference. Almost every single bank-owned property does have to get listed in the local MLS. It does require a minimum amount of exposure time, anywhere from 2 to 20 days, depending upon the client. And the objective of almost every single institutional seller is to sell to a first-time home buyer as opposed to an investor.
Okay, so in most conventional transactions, you have a home inspection phase, and a lot of times the buyer, they may find deficiencies on the home that they purchased, and they try to get a credit from the seller. Is the banks usually receptive to that, or are they resistant to that?
It really depends upon the seller. You will have some sellers that will work with you. You will have some sellers that will say as is means as is, we're not doing anything. It's up to the institutional seller to disclose everything about the property. Not only is it law, but it's also to help educate the buyer as to what some of the downfalls could be. Some institutional sellers will let you do your home inspection. You could possibly ask for a minor cost reduction, repair. They may or may not do it. Others will just say as is, and in my opinion, those are more the uneducated institutional sellers who really don't know what they're saying. They're just following the old party line.
So, REO stands for what?
Real estate owned.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And that's an old, I forget the word that you use for it. It's an old abbreviation from probably the 1970s, 60s, when there were no foreclosures, and there was a line item mention on the financial statements. They just called it REO, real estate owned.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, usually when the home goes to sheriff's sale and the sheriff drops its gavel, I think in New Jersey there's a 10-day redemption period in which that time the buyer can make whole the lender.
Yes.
In probably 99.999% of the time, that never happens.
Correct.
So when then the bank takes the property back and it goes to you, Don Fanelli, who you manage their asset and you market it and package it for sale, is the bank entitled to make more money that was owed to them, or usually that doesn't happen?
Actually, that's a good question, and the only way that could possibly happen is if there were 2 or 3 mortgages on the property. Because typically the first mortgage, first lien holder would do the foreclosure. And if the second lien holder and third lien holder don't show up at the sheriff's sale to protect their interests, they're wiped out. So you could have a $200,000 first mortgage, you could have a $50,000 second mortgage, a $50,000 third mortgage. So you have a total of whatever that equals, $300,000, I think. So yes, the second and third mortgages would be wiped out. The first lien holder could possibly make a profit.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, in your professional and valued opinion, have foreclosure filings in New Jersey slowed down at all since the credit crisis?
New Jersey in itself has been a unique animal for the last, I would say, since September of 2010. Right now in the country, New Jersey is the #1 state with mortgages in default.
Wow. Still?
Well, just recently we moved into #1. First we had to move into 10, and then we slowly reached our way up to second, and then out to first.
And you have anything that you can contribute that to, or?
Yes. The foreclosure world in New Jersey has been in disarray for many years. Mm-hmm. If you remember going back to September 2010, when robo-signing first hit the airwaves, it basically shut down the top 6 lenders, which basically put a halt on sheriff sales for about, I want to say, about a year and a half.
You know, that's a good point, Don. And maybe for our listeners, you can speak a little bit more about that robo-signing and what exactly that did.
The robo-signing was really a lot of fictitious signatures, notarizations. It was every bad thing that somebody could possibly do to speed up the foreclosure process and violate the homeowner's rights.
So in other words, the mortgage note, they were just randomly signing? Because I know the mortgages get sold to this bank, they get sold to that bank, and a lot of times originals get misplaced or lost, and that's really has to do with that robo-signing? Mm-hmm.
There were false notarizations, backdating of when letters went out. Mm-hmm. It was everything that you could do wrong, they did it.
Okay. In my 32 years of selling real estate, and I know that every time the consumer hears foreclosure, bank-owned, right away they think it's a steal me property. Can you elaborate on that for us as well? Set the record straight.
In areas like New Jersey, where, yes, there's a lot of inventory, you're not going to get a steal. You're going to make some money, but you're not going to steal a property. If you want to go back to Nevada, maybe 5-6 years ago when Nevada was crashing, there were a ton of opportunities to steal good properties. In Florida, that would be a true statement also. But in New Jersey, it really has never been a state where you could just steal properties because there was always a demand for that property. Okay,
so if Matt, our co-host, wanted to buy one of these bank-owned properties, but he loved the property, but he just felt it needed too much work, do the banks have anything set up like a rehab type mortgage or a mortgage that he can then finance the? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
For a first-time home buyer, that's actually the best opportunity. You want to find the biggest dog in the nicest neighborhood that needs the most amount of work, And there are banks out there, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. I'm sure there are a few others out there that will lend you the money to purchase the home, and they will also lend you the money to do the repairs. And as long as you qualify for the mortgage and for the repair dollars, you're in.
Wow. Is that like an FHA 203K, or is that a little different in the sense that the lender basically is appraising the house after all the repairs are done, so they know?
Well, the 203K is really a renovation loan strictly for FHA buyers. But you also have renovation loans for conventional buyers. The way it's going to work is the appraiser will go out to the property. He'll appraise the property as if it was in its perfect condition. Then they will back out the cost of repairs. They will then back out the mortgage. And as long as the numbers line up, you got a deal.
Okay. And also, when the property comes to you, does the bank look to your expertise and advice as to if we put X amount of dollars into the home, that the ROI, the rate of return, would be as such? Do they make those decisions on a case-by-case basis?
Yes. Every single bank-owned property must go through a broker price opinion. It must go through an appraisal to make sure that one is not sandbagging the other. And it is our job to give them a price between as is and repaired. And we're expected to come within 5% of that number.
Wow, that's pretty. You have to be pretty accurate on them.
Sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we don't.
So in other words, though, they have that broker's price opinion, which is also known as a BPO, and appraisal, just to make sure that everyone's in line with the value.
Yes, unfortunately, this is still an industry like any other industry where you can have some bad apples, so it's more of a check and balance system.
Right. Now, you've probably, I don't know how many properties you've sold. I'm sure it's up there. I know in New Jersey they have what's called a deficiency judgment, meaning that, let's say the sheriff forecloses on the property, they owed $300. The bank was only able to sell it for $250. There was a deficiency of $50,000. Did the banks ever go after that former owner?
In all my years, which is 17 years, the average John Doe will not have to worry about a deficiency judgment. If you're speaking about somebody in multi-million-dollar homes who might have a $1 million business, other $1 million homes, it's possible the bank would go after them for a deficiency judgment, but the average John Doe doesn't have to worry about it.
Okay. All right, so we answered that question at the banks, yes, on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes we'll invest money if they deem it appropriate based on what you tell them as the professional as well as the appraiser. How can the consumer obtain a list of these bank-owned properties that you manage?
It isn't so much the properties that I manage, because I don't know what I'm going to manage until I wake up each morning. And that's the truth. Some of my clients will send me an email in the middle of the night that says, okay, here's a new property. So I won't know until 6, 7 o'clock in the morning when I wake up if I have more work.
Unreal. So you're going 24/7, pretty much.
But there are some websites that the consumer can follow. There's homesteps.com, which is Freddie Mac. There's homepath.com, which is Fannie Mae. There is, I believe it's reo.wellsfargo.com. And all that's going to really do is just give you a preview of what's coming. It all has to wind up in the MLS.
Okay. Now, I'm sure you have cases where you've had multiple offers on some of these bank-owned properties. Do they work the process different than a seller would, or how do they do that?
Basically, when there's 2 or more offers, regardless of whether one is very high, one is very low, both parties are entitled to a final highest and best. We will email the agent, let them know there's a multiple offer situation. We have a set day and time for them to return with their highest and best form. Everything is then submitted, recorded in the client's website, and then the client will pick accordingly.
Don, is it always who's the highest, or they look at all the terms of the contract? Like maybe someone who has a really, really strong down payment, a really strong pre-approval letter, so they take all those compensating factors into their decision process.
It's not always highest price, it's best offer and terms.
Right. Now, a lot of times, too, when you put these properties on the market, are there restrictions as far as, like, investors, when they can buy them? Is there a window? Okay.
It's becoming more and more common for the major players, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, Wells Fargo, to have a waiting period before investors can jump in. There's a conscious effort between the three of them to increase first-time homebuyer ownership. They want to give the first-time home buyer, or even any home buyer, an opportunity to pick up a home before an investor can pick it up. In this area, we're not really an investor market where they buy, hold for the rent, but other states, it makes all the sense in the world to buy and hold for the rent.
Very interesting. Well, we just got noticed by our engineer, Peter Cornell, that we've reached the midpoint of our episode, and the New Jersey Real Estate will return after hearing from our sponsors.
The New Jersey Real Estate Show is brought to you by the law offices of Joseph C. Petriello, located in Wayne, New Jersey. To contact them, call 973-890-7262. That's 973-890-7262. Are you purchasing or refinancing a home? Do you need a free same-day pre-approval? Then call Dean Scaduto from Coldwell Banker Home Loans at 201-322-3456. That's 201-322-3456.
Welcome back to the New Jersey Real Estate Show. We're here with our guest, Don Fanelli from Coldwell Banker, as we continue our discussion on bank-owned properties. During the break, Matt had a very good question, and I'm going to let him ask it to Don right now.
Would you say it was a reasonable question?
I think it was a very, very good question.
To come from the voice of reason?
The voice of reason, yes.
Don, can the banks that are owning the property rent them out? In other words, become a landlord to renters instead of buyers?
That's actually a two-part question.
Okay.
In the state of New Jersey, if they were to foreclose on a particular home and you were personally a tenant, you are protected.
Okay.
You are protected by the New Jersey Tenant Anti-Eviction Act.
Ah, okay. That's good to know.
So the bank would have to offer you a month-to-month lease if you didn't have one, and if you did have a long-term valid lease, they would have to honor it.
Okay. All right. That's pretty much the law with? Oh no, it's not. If I'm buying your house that you're renting out to people, I don't have to honor the lease.
Actually, it depends upon the type of lease. If you were living in a particular house, and I happened to be the owner, and I sold it, and you had a 2-year lease, whoever bought your house has to keep you by law.
Okay. All right.
They have to honor your lease.
Okay. And so then what's the second part of the question?
The banks will not rent to the average John Doe unless they're already living there. Now, there are hedge funds out there that have bought non-performing notes from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and all the major players, and their sole purpose, as with any hedge fund, is to make a profit. Mm-hmm. So in many cases, they will flip some of those properties. They'll hold some of those properties for rent. They'll get the positive cash flow and hold on to it for a few years like they did in Nevada, Florida, knowing that certain pockets would go up in value, and then they cash in.
Okay.
Very interesting. Yeah, Matt.
No, I was just going to say,
You're doing very well,
with that answer.
So
yeah.
Fire away.
No, that's it.
Hey, Don, how long from the time the sheriff's sale occurs does it usually take for the REO to actually hit the real estate market, to come on the market?
That's a trick question. How easy are you going to be to move?
That brings me up to my next question. I've heard the term cash for keys.
Yes.
And maybe you're going to tell our listeners a little bit about that.
Well, I'm a little cynical when I say this, but only in America can you not pay your mortgage for 5 years, get foreclosed on, and they'll still give you money to move. So God bless America.
Well, I guess the bank looks at it's easier sometimes to do that because New Jersey is a tenant-friendly state, and even though the bank owns the property and you have the former owner in there not paying his mortgage maybe for 2 or 3 years,
Maybe.
very difficult to get him out, correct?
Yes and no. The banks will do cash for keys. Some of them call it financial relocation assistance, depending upon how they want to look, whether they want to be nice people or just look like everybody else. But bottom line is, they want to offer you a financial incentive to vacate as quickly as possible to avoid the extra holding costs, the eviction, the moving, and everything else associated with an extra 6 or 7 months of waiting.
Okay, now we're the summer is coming near to an end, as much as it pains me to say that, and the leaves are going to start to fall off the trees, and winter's going to start to set in. With your properties, do they leave the utilities on, or do they winterize it? How do they do that?
No, we always leave utilities on. We do winterize all properties. I believe for 2 reasons. Number one, I believe it's an insurance reason that if the properties are not winterized, something happens, then the owner of record cannot file an insurance claim because the insurance policy said your properties had to be winterized from October 15th to March 15th.
Now, do you get any properties that are not financeable, meaning that they're in such a state of disarray?
That's actually a misconception.
Okay.
Every single property is financeable. There's not a single property out there you can't finance, which is the whole purpose of a renovation loan.
Okay, fantastic. Now, are there any special addendums that a buyer may have to sign when he purchases an REO?
Absolutely. You have to remember that the banks are dealing with properties in all 50 states. They can't be bothered looking at probably 300-400 different versions of a broker contract. So pretty much they have their own standard seller's addendum, which is an overlay to the broker contract, which pretty much says, I don't care what the broker contract says, these are the terms and conditions. So they don't even have to read it.
Okay, so let's say you have a bank-owned property that's on the market 69, now it's on the market 120 days. Will they eventually reduce that property, or they stay firm on their price?
No. We're responsible as agents, brokers, to submit a monthly status report every 30 days. It doesn't have to be the 30th day of a month, but every 30 days we have to report back the marketing activity for that particular property, what new listings have come on the market, what properties have sold, and it helps the asset manager decide whether or not to adjust the value 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%, but we have to do that in order to keep them abreast of the market conditions.
Okay. Now, I know you deal with various clients, so as far as, let's say Matt makes an offer on one of the bank-owned properties, what's the wait time usually of when he'll get a response, whether they're going to accept his offer, reject it, or maybe counter him?
Under normal circumstances, less than 24 hours.
Wow, that's quick.
What are
In some
normal
cases,
circumstances?
4 hours.
What are normal circumstances?
It all really comes down to the person who's supposed to actually look at the offer.
Okay.
If they're lazy, it's going to take a few days.
So, like, if your email comes in first in the day on, say, Wednesday, but that person has the habit of answering the last email that came in on Wednesday first and working backwards, it might take till maybe Friday morning or Thursday night or something.
You're not talking about my old work habits, are you?
No. I just a hypothetical.
No. Yes, part of what you just said is very true, but we also scan our inbox to make sure that we're not missing offers. We do have an obligation to the seller to get them in as quickly as possible. Usually anything under 24 hours is acceptable to them.
I got another question for you. I knew people who I used to live in Pennsylvania, and I knew people who owned a B&B, and they were foreclosed on. And about a year later, it went up for a sheriff's sale, and right before they vacated, they just stripped the place. All the copper piping, they literally even sold the kitchen sink. They sold stuff out of the house. How common is that, or is that just what real a-holes do? Pardon my French.
People would actually think that was a inner city problem.
Oh, no.
No. Those days are long gone.
No.
That problem exists in all neighborhoods, all classes, all different types of incomes. It is not unusual to walk into a home and find missing appliances, missing light fixtures, maybe some missing copper.
Toilets.
Vandalism where they've actually poured cement down the toilet drains. So, yes, it does happen every place.
But often, though? Or is that a common thing? Or is that...
No, I would say...
Say, like, out of 10 houses.
1 at best.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, but that's still just a low.
It's one too many.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, because you didn't pay the mortgage. Don't get mad at the bank for wanting their money.
Yeah, but you know what? There's a lot of reasons why people don't pay a mortgage.
Well, yeah, no, I understand that.
Well, a lot of times, too, bad things happen to good people.
Mm-hmm.
That's true, too.
And the decent person, I'm sure, Don, you can attest to this, that when the bank gets that asset back, it's in virtually good condition.
We hope that it's in good condition, but as we had spoken about earlier, for the last 2 years, when I receive a new file from my client, that property's been vacant 3 to 5 years. So I'm getting a house that's in very poor condition.
Yeah, so you deal a lot probably with environmental issues like mold.
Almost every day.
Wow. Unreal. Okay. Well, listen, Don, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. The wealth of information.
My time is up.
The wealth of information you shared with our listeners was extremely informative, insightful. It certainly sheds a lot of light on this topic of bank-owned properties. And again, thanks for sharing and coming on the show. We really appreciate having you. Your wealth of knowledge, you really are.
Thank you for having me.
And make sure you tune in next week as we discuss in depth the entire short sale process. Our in-house guest will be David Stern from Integrity First Financial, a short sale specialist. Thanks for listening, and remember, great leaders aspire to lead and then lead to inspire others. Stay safe, everyone.
Are you an expert in your field?
Do you want your voice to be heard?
Maybe you have a great idea for a show but don't know how to do it.
Well, we can make it happen.
Email the New Jersey Podcast Guys at njpodcastguys@gmail.com.